Episode 4. Executing the Traitor. Purging the enemy within night fell over Dai La like an endless black curtain swallowing the entire horizon. Massive storm clouds rolled across the summer sky, devouring the moon and the final stars above the ancient land. Cold winds screamed through the abandoned rice fields outside the fortress, carrying the smell of wet earth, smoke, and the heavy scent of war approaching from the distant mountains. Then the storm arrived. At first, only a few drops struck the hardened ground, but within moments, the heavens seemed to split apart. Rain crashed down upon Dai La with terrifying violence. Dirt roads instantly became rivers of mud. Broken wooden carts outside abandoned villages rattled beneath the force of the storm winds. Far across the flooded plains, tiny red lights slowly began appearing through the darkness. One torch, then 10, then thousands. An entire sea of fire slowly emerged beneath the storm. Ngô Quyền army had arrived. Outside the fortress walls, thousands of Vietnamese soldiers stood silently beneath the freezing rain. Water streamed down their armor and helmets while trembling torches illuminated endless rows of spears and shields. No one spoke. No one laughed. Only the deep sound of war drums echoed through the darkness like the heartbeat of a nation awakening for battle. At the center of that enormous army, Ngô Quyền rode slowly upon his black warhorse. His heavy battle cloak whipped violently behind him as cold rain poured across his face. Soldiers lowered their heads respectfully as he passed. Within the flickering torchlight, Ngô Quyền expression remained cold and unshaken. Tonight was not simply another battle. Tonight was judgment. He stopped atop a muddy hill overlooking Dai La Fortress. Through the rain and smoke, the massive city appeared like a monstrous shadow drowning beneath the storm. Somewhere behind those walls, Kiều Công Tiễn still clung desperately to the power he had stolen through betrayal. But Ngô Quyền had not come only to reclaim a city. He had come to end the nightmare consuming the nation. As rain thundered across the battlefield, old memories slowly returned to him. He remembered peaceful summers beside the rivers of his homeland. Endless rice fields glowing beneath golden sunlight. Bamboo groves swaying gently beside quiet village roads. The soft sound of oars striking river water beyond the docks. And beside him, his father, no man. As a child, Ngô Quyền once walked beside his father through peaceful village paths while listening carefully to every lesson he spoke. Inside their small wooden home illuminated by warm candlelight, no man had once placed his hand gently upon his son's shoulder and said, "You must remember, this country survives only because there are people willing to stand and protect it." At the time, Ngô Quyền had been too young to fully understand those words. Until blood was spilled, the peaceful memories suddenly vanished. Dark palace corridors replaced them. Rushing footsteps, clashing steel, screams echoing through the night. Kiều Công Tiễn had secretly met with traitorous conspirators beneath flickering candlelight, while battle maps covered the stone table before him. Hidden beneath his sleeve rested a dagger waiting for the perfect moment. Outside the palace, rain had fallen just as violently as it did tonight. Then the rebellion began. Traitor soldiers stormed through the corridors like starving wolves. Loyal guards fought desperately to defend no man inside a courtyard drowning in blood. Steel crashed against steel beneath the storm-filled sky, while thunder shook the palace walls. And finally, no man fell. That moment had never left Ngô Quyền memory. Back in the present, his hand tightened around the sword hilt until his knuckles turned pale. Rain continued pouring across the battlefield, but his eyes no longer carried sorrow, only resolve. Jung Tam Ka rode forward through the storm and bowed respectfully. "My lord, everything is prepared." Behind him, massive siege engines were dragged slowly through the mud by exhausted soldiers. Heavy wooden wheels sank deep into the flooded earth while other troops sharpened giant stakes, prepared siege ladders, and loaded enormous stones into catapults beneath the glow of burning torches. Ngô Quyền silently stared toward Dai La one final time. He understood there was little time left. Far to the north, the southern Han kingdom was already preparing its invasion. If Kiều Công Tiễn was not destroyed quickly, foreign armies would descend upon the land, while the Vietnamese people remained divided. Ngô Quyền slowly drew his sword. Lightning flashed across the blade. At that exact moment, the great war horn screamed through the rain-filled night. The entire army moved. Thousands of soldiers raised shields and spears before marching toward Dai La beneath deafening war drums and endless thunder. The earth itself seemed to tremble beneath their advance. Inside the fortress, frightened defenders stared through the rain at the endless sea of approaching torches beyond the walls. War had arrived. Inside the palace, Kiều Công Tiễn awoke violently from sleep. Flickering candlelight illuminated his pale face, while distant war drums echoed through the storm. A messenger collapsed to his knees before him. Ngô Quyền army is advancing on the eastern wall. Kiều Công Tiễn rushed toward the palace window and froze in horror. Outside the fortress, thousands upon thousands of burning torches stretched across the plains like an ocean of fire. For the first time, true fear appeared in his eyes. His trembling hands pressed against battle maps spread across the table. Supplies inside the fortress were running low. Soldiers were exhausted. Hunger had already begun spreading through the city. Women and children hid inside dark homes while war drums echoed through the rainy night. Kiều Công Tiễn shouted furiously at the frightened commanders surrounding him, but even his rage could not conceal the panic growing inside him. One nervous officer finally spoke. The Southern Han reinforcements still have not arrived. Silence consumed the room. The candle flames trembled violently in the cold wind. And deep inside his heart, Kiều Công Tiễn began realizing the terrible truth. He had been abandoned. Outside the fortress, Vietnamese soldiers carried ladders and ropes through the rain-soaked mud while arrows flew overhead. Mud-covered hands gripped wooden ladders tightly as the army prepared for the assault. Then Ngô Quyền raised his sword high beneath. The storm. Thousands of soldiers roared together. The battlefield exploded. War drums thundered across the plains as giant catapults launched massive stones toward the fortress walls. Huge projectiles smashed into Dai La with terrifying force, sending stone and debris exploding through the night. Defenders were thrown backward from the battlements. At the same time, countless flaming arrows rose into the stormy sky like burning stars before crashing into wooden towers and rooftops inside the city. Fire spread rapidly. Black smoke rose above Dai La, while civilians fled through narrow streets carrying children and belongings in terror. Flames reflected across flooded roads while chaos swallowed the fortress from within. Viet Nam Ca charged forward on horseback while leading assault troops toward the walls. Thousands of soldiers rushed through mud beneath arrows and rain, lifting ladders against the towering stone battlements. Defenders hurled rocks downward. Boiling oil poured from the walls. Men screamed as fire spread across burning ladders. But the attackers kept climbing. One soldier fell. Another immediately took his place. Hand-to-hand combat erupted atop the battlements beneath smoke, blood, rain, and fire. Young warriors blocked enemy spears while ancient stone walls became drenched in mud and blood alike. Below, massive battering rams slammed repeatedly against the fortress gates. The enormous wooden doors began splintering. Inside the city, terrified defenders desperately tried reinforcing the collapsing entrance while lightning flashed across the battlefield and flames consumed sections of the walls. Ngô Quyền watched the burning fortress silently from atop his black warhorse. There was no joy in his eyes, only necessity. He understood every stone falling from Dai La carried the suffering of innocent people. But if the traitor within was not destroyed now, the entire nation would soon face foreign conquest. Then finally, a massive section of the fortress wall collapsed into smoke and rubble. The Vietnamese army surged forward like a flood breaking through a shattered dam. Defenders retreated deeper into the city as brutal street fighting erupted. Through burning alleyways, civilians fled through smoke-filled streets while soldiers battled beneath collapsing rooftops and spreading fire. Viet Nam Ca led armored troops directly toward the inner palace gates. Exhausted defenders dropped broken shields and retreated desperately toward the royal courtyards. Inside the palace chamber, Kiều Công Tiễn heard battle screams growing closer. Closer, closer. A messenger stumbled through the doors covered in mud and blood before collapsing to the floor. The eastern wall has fallen. Kiều Công Tiễn stepped backward in terror. Outside the palace windows, Dai La was burning. The city he had betrayed the nation to control was collapsing around him. At the palace gates, Vietnamese soldiers smashed through the final barricades. Palace doors burst open beneath the assault, while torches illuminated dark stone corridors. Desperate guards fought their final battles inside narrow hallways, but the defenders could no longer stop the advancing army. Ngô Quyền dismounted outside the burning palace entrance. Flames reflected across his rain-covered armor as he slowly walked through smoke-filled corridors surrounded by elite guards. His boots stepped heavily across blood-covered floors beneath flickering torchlight. But when he finally reached the throne chamber, it was empty. Kiều Công Tiễn had fled. The traitor had gathered gold, maps, and whatever remained of his stolen power before escaping through hidden underground tunnels beneath Dai La Jung Tam Ka knelt before Ngô Quyền. "My lord." He escaped through the secret passageways. Ngô Quyền expression did not change. "Pursue him." Immediately, elite Vietnamese cavalry charged through the burning streets beneath heavy rain. Horses thundered across muddy roads while torches illuminated the darkness of the storm-covered forests beyond the city. Ahead of them, Kiều Công Tiễn fled in terror. Rain struck his face as he rode desperately through flooded forest roads, constantly glancing backward. Behind him, distant pursuit horns echoed through the mountains. Fear spread among his remaining guards. One soldier abandoned him, then another. Soon many disappeared into the darkness, leaving the traitor increasingly alone. Kiều Công Tiễn screamed furiously at the fleeing men while rain poured across his terrified face. But no one remained loyal to a dying traitor. Through the thick forest fog, Ngô Quyền cavalry finally emerged like spirits of judgment beneath flashing lightning. Kiều Công Tiễn reached an abandoned riverside temple hidden deep within the mountains. Desperate and exhausted, he rushed inside the ruined sanctuary while thunder shook the broken roof overhead. Rainwater dripped through cracked stone ceilings. His breathing became heavier. Outside, horses stopped. Then came footsteps. Slow, steady, unavoidable. Ngô Quyền entered the temple courtyard beneath storm-filled skies, while soldiers silently surrounded the area. Inside the ruined sanctuary, Kiều Công Tiễn backed away while gripping his trembling sword. Ngô Quyền stared at him coldly beneath the flickering torchlight. In that moment, he no longer saw merely a defeated enemy. He saw the night his father died. He saw betrayal, chaos, division, and the shadow of foreign invasion approaching from the north. Kiều Công Tiễn desperately tried explaining himself. He spoke of survival, of politics, of power. He begged for negotiation, mercy, and forgiveness. But his words sounded hollow beneath the ancient temple roof. Some crimes could not be erased. Ngô Quyền silently remembered his father collapsing beneath the storm all those years ago. Kiều Công Tiễn slowly fell to his knees. Rain mixed with tears across his terrified face while thunder exploded outside the ruined temple. His sword slipped from trembling hands. He begged desperately for mercy. Ngô Quyền slowly raised his blade. Temple torches flickered violently. Soldiers lowered their heads in silence. Then lightning flashed across the mountains, and judgment was carried out. The storm continued washing blood across the ancient temple stones, while distant thunder echoed through the darkness. Ngô Quyền stood silently over the defeated traitor while the rain slowly weakened outside. Jung Tam Ka and the soldiers bowed respectfully. The enemy within had finally been purged. But the war was not over. By morning, fog rose above the forest surrounding Dai La as Ngô Quyền army returned toward the fortress after victory. Smoke still rose from the damaged city beneath the pale light of dawn. The battle had ended, but its scars remained everywhere. Burned streets, collapsed walls, broken weapons scattered across muddy roads. Yet within the ruins, hope slowly began returning. Victorious soldiers entered the fortress gates while exhausted civilians watched silently. Women reunited emotionally with surviving family members beside damaged homes. Workers extinguished the remaining fires while soldiers cleared shattered barricades from the streets. Ngô Quyền rode slowly through the wounded city beneath the soft morning light. Civilians lowered their heads respectfully as he passed, not because they feared him, but because they understood. The nightmare of Kiều Công Tiễn was finally over. At last, Ngô Quyền stood atop the fortress walls overlooking peaceful skies after the storm had passed. Morning sunlight slowly spread across Dai La, while distant smoke drifted into the wind. But far to the north, dark storm clouds still gathered beyond the horizon. Ngô Quyền understood what was coming next. Kiều Công Tiễn was dead, But his plea for foreign intervention had already reached the southern Han kingdom, and soon, enemy warships would descend upon Đại Việt. Ngô Quyền tightened his hand around the sword hilt while staring toward the distant northern horizon. The battle within the nation had ended, but the greatest battle for independence was only beginning.